That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Alright guys, before we get into the video, I want to make an apology for being inconsistent with the videos lately. I've moved out of my apartment a week or two ago. I went and stayed with my family for a little bit. I went and stayed with my girlfriend's family for a little bit, and then we're moving my things into a new apartment, I believe in 7 or 8 days. So pretty much I've just been all over the place, and it's been very hectic. That's why we've been having to switch to just audio only for the videos for the past few days, and I think that's going to continue for the next week or so. But nonetheless, I think the content is still here, the quality is still here, and that's really all that matters, because it does not matter at all if y'all can see me. All that matters is what I am saying. So now we are going to talk about the rookie running backs, something that we have been doing all offseason. But now, I mean, a lot of things are changing throughout the NFL. We know that situations are currently more fragile than ever with the COVID pandemic situation. And we have to understand that that has fantasy implications. We've already seen it with Damian Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So we are going to look at these running backs, see how their situations have changed. Most of them have not, yet we've also been able to go through, look at how the dynasty community has reacted as a whole, and try to correctly identify how we should be evaluating these players. So now let's just start it off with the top rookie running backs. These two guys were in a tier of their own, but now I'm looking at it and I want to put Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that own tier, just because we're looking at Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor, and I spent a good amount of time on the Patreon podcast about this morning, so I don't want to dive too much into it yet again. But essentially, we look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who has the potential to have the majority of the workload and is likely to have the majority of the workload in the league's best offense in 2020 and beyond. And if we look at what's going on in high-stakes fantasy football leagues, which is my favorite thing to do, because if we go over and we look at the leagues where people are putting up $3,000 or $5,000 to play in a fantasy football league, I would generally want to believe that those players are sharper and those players really have a good sense of what they are doing, a lot better than just some random guy that you're listening to on Twitter saying what he thought he saw on film. So we look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire and we look at Jonathan Taylor, and currently in those leagues that cost $3,000, $5,000 to play in, Clyde Edwards-Helaire for 2020 redraft is currently going around pick 5 or 6 after the Damian Williams news, where we see Jonathan Taylor, he's going all the way in the middle to the end of the 4th round. So this speaks volumes to what we can expect in 2020. And if we can expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire to already be a mid RB1 to even a high RB1, because he's currently being drafted around the RB4 in redraft leagues, in my opinion, I am all in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't think that he really has too much downside with his profile, because even if he becomes a very subpar runner of the football, he's still going to be catching passes from Patrick Mahomes in very high leverage situations. So with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're looking at a 21-year-old running back who is currently going as the RB4 or the RB5 in 2020 redraft leagues. So this is as much of a sure thing as you will ever see in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I currently have him ranked only behind Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey in my Dynasty running back rankings overall. Jonathan Taylor, though, is still a fantastic talent in his own right. Jonathan Taylor is definitely, by all accounts, a better rusher of the football than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but we don't know how that is going to translate to fantasy production. I expect Jonathan Taylor, who I have as the RB2 in this class, I think I am going to finalize him in the same tier as Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just because I know that there are still going to be people that go out there and say that Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be valued lower than Jonathan Taylor. Yet we look at Jonathan Taylor, he has the size, he has better production than any other rookie running back in this draft class, and he is an elite athlete. I mean, he checks every single box you would ever want to see from a rookie running back profile, and this is a guy that I'm also going out there, and I am investing a significant amount of capital in Dynasty leagues. If I can go in my Dynasty startup draft with my first round pick in the startup draft, take Clyde Solaire, and then with my second round pick in the startup draft, take Jonathan Taylor, I think that is a dream scenario, and both of these running backs are going to be running back ones for the next 5 or so years. Now, let's get into the tier 2 of running backs, and let's kick it off with J.K. Dobbins. Now, J.K. Dobbins pretty much finds himself in the best situation outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire of these 2020 rookie running backs. I know that they have Mark Ingram there, but he's only there for the time being. We know Mark Ingram is a lot older than most starting running backs for the NFL, and J.K. Dobbins is going to be able to slide into that role, which produced so many fantasy points in 2019, and with Lamar Jackson there for the long term, with a great offensive line, I think that J.K. Dobbins, even if he does not get the volume that a Cam Akers or a Jonathan Taylor will see, he will still be able to be extremely efficient with the touches he sees, and he'll be able to see a great amount of fantasy success. I think that he is also a low-end dynasty running back one already without playing an NFL snap. Now, let's get into the RB4, Cam Akers. Cam Akers is another one of these running backs, and I hate to just sound like I'm just repeating the same thing over and over again, but I want to emphasize these top 5 running backs in this draft class, they are historically great for a rookie running back draft class. They all have the size, they all have the athleticism, and they all have the pass-catching ability. I mean, this is not something that you find very often in terms of rookie running backs, and we see 5 of them all in the same draft class, and that's why I'm so excited to go out there and get any of these guys. But nonetheless, we look at Cam Akers, who's going here at 4 for me, and with Cam Akers, he's sliding into an offense that does have a subpar offensive line. Hopefully, if they stay healthy in 2020, they can be a lot better than what we saw in 2019. Yet at the same time, we have to understand that we cannot expect some top leverage situations for Cam Akers, because this is not the Los Angeles Rams team that we saw a couple years ago. They really went out there, they really pushed all in to try to win on Jared Goff's rookie contract, and now that window's over. Now they're having to pay the price for missing that window, and they don't really have the assets to build an elite team like we see with the Baltimore Ravens, like we see with a Kansas City Chiefs. Yet Cam Akers, he still has the athleticism, he has the size, he can catch the ball, and we saw the Los Angeles Rams go out there and significantly invest into him with their second-round pick. So Cam Akers, I'm projecting him to be a high-end RB2 for the 2021 season and a mid to low RB2 for the 2020 season. And if you are getting that on a rookie contract with a running back that is not going to lose value anytime soon, I mean, this is another guy. I'm willing to go out there and draft Cam Akers aggressively in dynasty startup drafts and dynasty rookie drafts. Now, the last running back in this tier 2 is going to be Deandre Swift. Deandre Swift was actually my running back 1 going into the NFL draft, just because I thought that he had the best shot as being the running back 1 off of the NFL draft board, and I thought that he was going to be the only running back to get that round 1 draft capital. Yet we actually see Deandre Swift find himself in a very poor situation in Detroit. There are multiple running backs there that are going to be able to take touches away from Deandre Swift. Yet at the same time, with his pass-catching ability, with how productive the Detroit Lions offense should be in 2020 and beyond, this is a guy I'm also extremely excited about. I know I dropped him down from my running back 1 pre-draft to now my running back 5, but that does not necessarily speak too much about Deandre Swift and how bad his landing spot is. It more speaks to, I did not expect these other running backs to find themselves in great landing spots. I did not expect Cam Akers to get drafted in the second round of the NFL draft. Just all those other running backs landing in ideal situations. That's what ended up knocking Deandre Swift down a couple pegs, but he is still the RB5 in this class and a part of a tier that is much higher than what we will see throughout the rest of the class. Now, let's get into Tier 3, and starting off with the RB6, in my opinion, we have Keyshawn Vaughn. Now, Keyshawn Vaughn is a guy that was going ahead of a lot of Tier 1 wide receivers for the 2020 NFL Draft, and I just did not understand that whatsoever. I went on, made multiple videos, I sent out multiple tweets telling everyone they were way too high on Keyshawn Vaughn. And now we see what has happened recently. LaShawn McCoy comes in. We don't know about Keyshawn Vaughn's health going into the 2020 season. And maybe we are going to see his draft stock plummet, not only in redraft leagues, but as well as in dynasty leagues. And I think that if that does happen, I will actually be willing to go out there and draft Keyshawn Vaughn. I think I can confidently draft him as soon as the other 5 running backs are off the draft board, as soon as the top 3 quarterbacks are off the draft board in Superflex leagues, and as soon as that tier 1 of wide receivers is as well off the draft board. Now, let's go to my RB7 and 8, and I keep on changing these guys every single day. I really like both of them ahead of consensus, and this is Antonio Gibson and A.J. Dillon. I'm not even going to try to rank the two, but we see that they both find themselves in situations that they look like they are going to be committee running backs at first, but I think that it is in the range of outcomes where they become workhorses, whether at the end of the 2020 season or at the beginning of the 2021 season. Because if we look at Antonio Gibson, who is a former wide receiver, we already know just based on him being a former wide receiver, he's going to be one of the best pass-catching running backs in this entire draft class. And at the same time, we are looking at his size, and he has it. I mean, this is the reason he really switched over to the running back position, because he was a subpar wide receiver, yet you looked at his athleticism, you looked at his size measurements, and you looked at the ability to catch the ball. I mean, this is a guy that, although not having a ton of touches at the college level, we can understand that at the running back position, it is the easiest position in football to transition over to. I mean, he's not trying to move from tight end to wide receiver, or wide receiver from tight end, or running back to wide receiver. I mean, those positions take years of practice. Those positions take a ton of technique. With running backs, it's really, do you have the size? Do you know what hole to hit? And do you have the speed to get past the defenders? And that's about all you need to be a successful running back. And I believe that Antonio Gibson is elite at all of those categories. And a lot of people want to say how many running backs there are in Washington. And I'm looking at it very simply. I think that if they did not plan on using Antonio Gibson as a running back in Washington heavily, they would not have selected him in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. If they truly believed that Derrius Guice was going to be healthy for the 2020 season and beyond, they believe that he was still a good and above average running back at the NFL level, they would not have spent a 3rd round pick on Antonio Gibson. They would not have gone out there and signed Peyton Barber. They would not have gone out there and signed J.D. McKissick. Every sign that this team has given us has showed that they are out on Derrius Guice and that they are ready to move on. So I think we should be as dynasty owners as well. Now with A.J. Dillon, I know he's behind Aaron Jones. The thing with Aaron Jones is, though, he is on his last year of his rookie contract. Maybe this pick in the 2nd round by the Green Bay Packers either signifies that they want to move Aaron Jones to more of a pass-catching role for the future, or they are just ready to move on from Aaron Jones and they don't want to go out there and pay him premium money while they were used to paying him that day 3 running back money, which we know he will command a lot more than that in free agency. Now, let's go to Tier 4, starting off with a player that a lot of people I know may argue to be in Tier 3 with the Keyshawn Vaughn, with the A.J. Dillon, and Antonio Gibson, but this is Zack Moss. Now, Zack Moss, everything about him looks like a running back that I have no interest in. He's slow, he's not overly large, and he is not a fantastic pass catcher, but he does have decent size, and he is a decent pass catcher. And he's behind a running back that I don't like at all in Devin Singletary. So with Zack Moss, it's more about the situation than the talent. I know a lot of people really like Zack Moss. I find that these are the same people who really liked David Montgomery last offseason because they really enjoy watching these running backs go in and make defenders miss in the box. While in reality, yes, they may be able to pick up an extra yard and get a first down. That's not going to translate to fantasy points for our fantasy teams, and that's why these guys are a lot more valuable for their NFL teams than they are for our fantasy teams. And even if Zack Moss does take the job from Devin Singletary, I just find it hard to believe that he has a ton of upside with Josh Allen taking the touchdowns at the goal line and with Devin Singletary still being in the backfield. Now, let's move to the next player who I was excited about a lot more a couple weeks ago than I am now, but this is Darrington Evans. Now, Darrington Evans looked to be one of the possible replacements for Derrick Henry in Tennessee in 2021 and beyond. Yet they go out there, they signed Derrick Henry to what I know a lot of people want to say is a 4-year deal. if you know things about NFL contracts, if you know how they treat running backs, you can see, in my opinion, that it is a 2-year deal. But nonetheless, that shows that Darrington Evans is not going to get significant work unless anything happens to Derrick Henry. But in the situation where it does, I believe that Darrington Evans has the talent where he can actually take not a full Derrick Henry workload, but the team is not going to have to drastically change their game plan. And what I like about Darrington Evans over a guy like Anthony McFarland, who is also in this tier, is in the situation where Derrick Henry does get injured and go down, because at this point we are essentially just looking at handcuff running backs. There's nobody really else in this backfield outside of Darrington Evans and Derrick Henry, so I believe that he is going to be able to command the significant amount of work share, whereas if we look at a guy who's next in the rankings, like Anthony McFarland, if we see James Conner go down, how much work is Anthony McFarland going to get compared to Jalen Samuels, compared to Benny Snell? I mean, there are a lot of guys in that backfield where I know none of them are superb talents, but I believe that it's going to allow Pittsburgh to run more of a running back by committee rather than just running Anthony McFarland into the ground. Now, one player that I've been extremely more interested about right at this point in the offseason, maybe I'm overthinking it, because earlier this offseason, especially after the NFL draft, I did not necessarily see the upside for him, but this is Lynn Bowden Jr. So we all know, very similar to Antonio Gibson, he was actually drafted as a wide receiver, but the team has made it clear that they plan to use him as a running back. And this is exciting just because we see that they went out there and they spent third-round draft capital on Lynn Bowden, who was extremely explosive and extremely productive in college, and he has everything that you would want to see from a good NFL running back. The main problem is, of course, that they not only have Jalen Richard there taking the passing game work, but they just spent a first-round pick on Josh Jacobs last offseason, so obviously they don't plan on moving on from Josh Jacobs anytime soon. So Lynn Bowden is more a bet about talent rather than situation, and he's a guy that I've been trying to target on my points per carry rosters, and I'm trying to just get him, put him on the taxi squad, and see if anything happens. Now the last player in this tier, Joshua Kelly. Now Joshua Kelly, he's just kind of a jag in my opinion. I know a lot of people want to get really excited about him, but what I'm most excited about is the situation he finds himself in. We see that he lands in a backfield that has Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson. Both of these guys are smaller running backs who are great at catching passes, yet we see Joshua Kelly come in, and he's a bigger-bodied back that may actually be able to provide something in the situation where Austin Eckler goes down that the Los Angeles Chargers may need. Now, let's get into the last tier of running backs that are going to be going in your rookie drafts. I'm going to be completely transparent. I don't think I have any of these guys on my dynasty rosters yet, just because I would rather trade out of the pick than get one of these guys, because at first there was one of these guys I was excited about, but since then the dynasty hype has happened and his price has increased. But let's start it off with La'Mical Pirine, who is a very subpar talent in my opinion, but we are looking at a situation where, say Le'Veon Bell goes down in New York, say just they don't want to use Le'Veon Bell as they did last season, and we know this is a very fragile situation where the coaching staff and Le'Veon Bell really don't get along, and Le'Veon Bell is definitely not the talent that he was in years past. Maybe we actually see La'Mical Pirine get an opportunity in New York. The main problem with this is what kind of talent is La'Mical Pirine and what kind of offense is he going to be playing in, because we know the situation dictates so much about fantasy value. Now, the last two guys, Eno Benjamin. I mean, if you remember, he was a guy that a lot of Devy players were excited about this time last offseason, yet he goes out, does not really do anything in his last year at ASU, and he goes and falls into, I believe, the 7th round of the NFL draft to the Arizona Cardinals. I believe that people are still drafting him based on name value alone. I would much rather have Chase Edmonds over Eno Benjamin, and this is a guy that I have not even thought about drafting in a single team. Now, last guy, DJ Dallas. I was excited about DJ Dallas until the Seattle Seahawks brought in Carlos Hyde. And I know Carlos Hyde is not a fantastic running back by any means, but he is a running back that he is going to block DJ Dallas. If something happens to Chris Carson and Rashad Penny is on the PUP, that's why I was excited about DJ Dallas. I thought that maybe he was actually going to be able to get a shot, but with the addition of Carlos Hyde, we know that Hyde would be taking the majority of those carries. Now, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed the video. Really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if you did, make sure you drop a like and make sure you subscribe.